Well, first of all, I wanted to echo what Peter Fratkov just said. Indeed, I mean, Russia, we've known that for many decades, is very much focused on attracting foreign capital, on attracting fundings, both through loans and both through the capital markets, and to stimulate the more, let's say, traditional instruments of financing. I think that's an important thing to do in an ongoing environment of volatilities of the capital markets. Now, with more focus on the capital market situation, I'd like to say that particularly during the crisis, or the first wave of the crisis in 2008 and 2009, it became apparent that international capital markets can very quickly dry up, and the availability of foreign funding was sharply decreased. So it was not a surprise that one of the first measures which the newly established project team to develop Moscow into an international financial center was really focusing on developing the local capital markets in all aspects. And here I would like to give a few remarks on what has happened and what we believe needs to be done going forward. One of the most important steps, everybody knows that, was the merger of the two big Russian exchanges, MySex and RTS, which happened in already several months ago, and the combined stock exchange is now working in full swing. That was the beginning, let's say, and that was the start in terms of setting a new infrastructure here in Russia. The most important next step is the creation of a central depository, and here we are again in the midst of the development process. The respective law has been passed, it has been adopted. By the way, a number of working groups where foreigners, including my bank, were involved, were actively participating in that discussion, and we are quite happy that as a result, this central depository now comes into reality. The background for that is very clear. Why do we need such a thing? Investors, both foreign and Russian investors, would look into decreasing risk, decreasing cost, increasing liquidity. So the merger of the exchanges was the first step, and now we need to really make sure that the whole capital markets infrastructure is taking place as well. At the moment, or up to now, the settlement of securities was really fragmented. We had a huge group of registrars, more than 40 institutions. There was the depository clearing company and the national settlement depository. Everybody was like moving around this topic, which resulted again in high cost, in more risk, and obviously very little efficiency. Now with the central depository coming into force, and the license for the NSD is actually expected by the end of the month, a lot will happen in that respect. First of all, cost will be reduced significantly, as there will be more flat fees or more clearly defined fees for the processes. Operational efficiency will increase tremendously, because the system will move away from a paper-based system towards, which takes quite some time actually to settle, towards a delivery versus payment system using SWIFT, using other types of technology, and there will be a very significant decrease of risk as a result of some legal changes, which I will come to in a moment. Now, the law on the central depository was the first thing, and now we are in a phase of a lot of sub-law regulation and new amendments to existing legislation will happen. I think one of the key element here is the so-called nominee shareholder concept. That will dramatically reduce risk and will help both the local depositories, like my depository, for example, at Deutsche Bank, as well as foreign investors, to reduce risk, since for the first time nominee shareholding will be accepted by law, and not the depository bank the depository will no longer be regarded as the owner of the securities, which really shifts legal ownership elements and the risk to where it belongs to. As a result of the process which we have gone through so far, I think there are two things which we can take away, and which I think are important also for the process going forward. since there are so many stakeholders and so many interests, it is very important to combine these efforts and really go through a single entry point into all these changes and communicate very quickly. Starting from now, in the course of the next few years, we will see a tremendous amount of regulatory changes, which already create now quite some headache to everybody who is participating there. So a very tight and focused communication around all the changes is extremely important to really keep the timeline and to really leverage on all the new and better performing elements of the settlements or capital markets logistics. Risk management obviously is the crucial thing going forward, as everybody will focus now on the single central depository, the NSD, and the respective risk around these remains very, very critical. What else needs to be done? This is the infrastructure, and we are very happy that this is now going to be in place. Where comes the liquidity from? Where does the liquidity come from? I think there has been a lot of debate around that topic for a while, and one positive thing has happened, perhaps triggered by the crisis in 2008-2009, that the domestic capital markets have quite substantially grown, and both borrowers and issuers of equity can now take much more liquidity and focus on more liquidity out of the local markets. But it is still not enough. There is the hope that more liquidity will be provided coming out of the pension system. There are elements of the pension reform which have become public and known, but what we would like to see going forward is that there is more liquidity which can be made available to bonds issued here in the local market and also equities issued in the local markets. That means that there must be more incentives for these type of investors, which are very conservative investors. The guidelines need to be changed, and obviously the risk around the instruments need to be very clear and transparent. But that is, I think, one of the key points which we need to focus on going forward, that liquidity obviously needs to be increased quite dramatically. And there are other investors like the insurance sector, banks obviously, and the retail investor ultimately, which needs to be developed over the next few years, which will take time, no doubt about it. The other area which is important and where we came a long way is the derivatives aspect. In order to manage risk adequately, you need to have the instruments. The legislation, again, is in place. It's been a long process to adopt the necessary laws. Now the market and the regulator is in the process to set up the necessary infrastructure around that. It's a repository system to register the derivatives transactions is under discussion and will be finalized soon, and the respective documentation around derivatives businesses, OTC derivatives businesses to be more precise, is also in full swing. So that, I hope, will be finalized just within the next few months, and then we would have a full set of instruments available which has been absent so far from the Russian market, and which will really help to stimulate business and transactions in the local capital markets. And I could continue for many more minutes or even hours. I would not want to do that. Just in a nutshell and finalizing here, I think particularly if I'm comparing the situation we have here with other capital markets in emerging markets where there is quite some focus on, given the potential that these markets have, I think Russia has a tremendous platform now to develop very quickly. Going forward, I see that from internally in my institution that there is quite some focus on developing local products and focus much more on issuing capacities and liquidities here out of the local market. So that, combined with the needs which Russia has in terms of financing, infrastructure projects going forward, a lot of issuing activity, the privatization program, I'm very optimistic that the capital markets here locally will play a very significant role in the future, and that with that the Moscow Financial Center project will make a very, very strong step going forward just within the very short period of time now. Thank you.
We contemplated having time for questions at the end, but if anyone has a question right now for the previous speaker, Mr. Bongartz, or for Peter Fradkov, just raise your hand. There's microphones in the audience. Sorry to surprise you with your participation. without warning. We can wait till the end. I do have a question for Mr. Bongartz. You mentioned liquidity, and particularly for the bond market being important. How relevant is the size of the current pension fund as well as insurance, the insurance business, which traditionally are important suppliers of liquidity for the capital markets? Where do you see the situation right now?
I mean, the size obviously is important, but I have no illusion that the trillions of rubles which are locked in the pension system are more than enough to feed sufficient liquidity. I think the key is not so much the size; it's really the possibility to make this liquidity flow into the markets. And here, changes need to happen. I think. We focus, for example, on one particular thing, the infrastructure financing and development of infrastructure bonds. Those might be quite ideal for pension money to be invested in, as they are long-term, they are conservative, these projects are pretty transparent. Guidelines need to change, and particularly the funds need to have the legal ability to invest in this type of instruments, which is under discussion.